Everyone's going to want to talk about Teen Titans and Batman Beyond Rebirth, but did we just see the end of the cheetah in the Wonder Woman book? There's so much going on this week, so let's check it all out. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is Shelf Appeal, the weekly show where I go over my new comic books, give you an idea what they're all about, and whether there's something you should go back to the shop for. What I want to start off with this week is Suicide Squad number 3. So Suicide Squad is being illustrated by Jim Lee, so ultimately it is an exceptionally good-looking book. However, it's a little thin on the story. Even though we're introducing General Zod back into the fray of the DC Universe, fresh from the Phantom Zone, it just seems to lack a little punch as far as the episode's concerned. We understand that Boomerang is no longer with us, and we get a great moment from Katana, but it's not really enough to sell me on the book going forward, so this is unfortunately a book I'm going to have to take off my pull list. Another book that's just kind of teetering on the edge is going to be Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, which sees issue number 5. So this book doesn't really do much for me at all in terms of progressing the story and the plot. We see John Stewart and the troops rallying, we see them interacting with this kind of giant space armada, and we find out that they're on their way to Warworld to wage a battle against the Sinestro Corps and take back the galaxy, the universe, from fear. So that's cool, but we knew that from last issue, and it doesn't really do anything to progress that. And then the Hal Jordan moment that we do get in the book is really based around telling Sinestro's daughter what happened to him, which we already saw in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps Rebirth book. So, I mean, it's setting up the next arc, which is going to be a giant space battle, which is totally cool and what Green Lantern books are all about, but this book itself was kind of a weaker one on the issue list. Then we get to a book that had some really strong moments, and that's Hellblazer number 2. So this is a monthly book, so it's kind of tough for me to piece up what was going with the story, but ultimately Swamp Thing has gone to John Constantine seeking for help, looking to find somebody. And John Constantine is thoroughly John Constantine. The one thing about this book, Simon Oliver is writing a great one, and the art is very good inside of it. However, I think that the localization has kind of taken me out of it a little bit. I try my best to understand the English tropes that are going into the dialogue, but I find it a little exclusionary sometimes, but I can't help it. It's the way that the book's being written, it's the way it's located, it's true to the source, so I'm fighting with myself about that aspect of Hellblazer. Overall, it looks like I'm going to continue to read it for the next few issues, but I can't say whether it's going to stick with me for a while. I'd like to see a little bit more development into where we're going now for the next story arc. Next, we hop onto a book that I'm enjoying beyond what I really expected, and that is Deathstroke number 3, where we get to see just how much of an asshole dad Slade Wilson is. So this is Rose Ravager, his daughter. Evidently, she's the anti-assassin, out there to protect people that are getting, a hit placed on them, those kind of things. And we get to see how Slade lost his eye because he was a terrible father, and how he confronts and talks to his daughter about how she's blue-balling her boyfriend or whatever the hell's going on. He is just a complete dick. And that's totally fine. It's a bad guy book about a bad guy. And this sets up the next story arc, which is, there's a lot of money flowing around this kind of hit regarding Rose Ravager. So obviously Deathstroke kind of leaps to somebody with a lot of money, a lot of influence coming from a specific place, like Gotham. So the confrontation between Deathstroke and Batman is imminent, and I can't wait to see what that's going to bring. Christopher Priest is writing a great book, and it's definitely something that I recommend people picking up if they want to read about a bad guy being bad. Another book about a bad guy being bad is Civil War II Kingpin. So Civil War II Kingpin, written by Matthew Rosenberg, is setting the stage for the main Kingpin title, and we see what happens when Kingpin loses his lucky rabbit's foot. So Janice is no longer in the picture, and he encounters Frank Castle, which just ends up being this horribly vicious bloodbath of a battle inside his mansion, and it's totally awesome. The art from Mr. Ortiz, I think it's Rodrigo Lopez Ortiz, is scratchy and it's dirty and it's grimy and it feels like seedy, which is really nice and highly complements the story. It might not be the most sophisticated tale, but you get to see the unbridled ambition, the arrogance, and the brutalism that is the Kingpin character, and that's one of the great features of this book. Another appearance of the Punisher is going to be in SpiderGwen issue number 12, where we see the confrontation between Frank Castle and Gwen Stacy Spider-Woman come to a head. And it doesn't resolve itself in a way that I expected it. There's a very limited backstory for Frank Castle inside the Earth-65 universe. Evidently, he worked in the War Machine program for Tony Stark, who's evidently a total douche in this universe, and he's got a repulsor. Right? There's all kinds of fan service going out in this particular book, and what it sets up is the final confrontation. Well, the final meeting between this universe's Kingpin, which just happens to be Matt Murdock. It's definitely a very odd character journey that Jason Latour is taking her down, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm not sure if it's going to be a success or not, but hey man, the ride's half the fun. Another book that's going on a little bit of a ride is Totally Awesome Hulk. And in this issue, what we see is Amadeus Cho going to kind of confront Clint Barton. And we don't know what his motivations are. We do know that he's extremely frustrated with the results of what happened between Barton and Bruce Banner. And if you haven't read Civil War II, Bruce Banner's dead. So Amadeus Cho, he gets caught up in a fight with Black Panther. So we get superheroes fighting superheroes, and it's just tired and it's boring. And I really feel like Greg Pak doesn't really want to write this part of the story. Because he was doing such different things with the Hulk character up until this point. I can't wait till he gets back to what he wants to write, which was really fun and entertaining for the Hulk. And now for a little bit more pleasant departure, we go on to Descender, which hits issue 15. So with Descender, we see the origin story of Andy and Effie's love. So how does a scrapper become enamored with this cyborg half-woman? And this is giving much-needed character development to those two people inside this series that hasn't really been seen so far. There's been plenty of development around the robots and those characters, Tim 21, Tim 22, those kind of things, and this is a much-needed departure from the main story to get that kind of emotional grounding for these two characters, and I'm really glad that Jeff Lemire did that. Highly recommend Descender for anybody that wants to go into a very beautiful watercolor space drama based around robots and humans and their interaction and what the definition of life is. So, highly recommended that you pick it up, and there's plenty of time to get caught up on the story. And now we're going to check out one of my surprise books of the week, and that is Action Comics 964. So this book was better than it had any real right to be. And it's not for the reason that the story was particularly good, because ultimately it's very simple, it's basic. Superman takes Clark Kent to his Fortress of Solitude, they go through all this DNA-based lie detecting. There's a whole lot of effort that's put into making sure that everybody understands Clark Kent is Clark Kent and Superman is Superman. That's it. There's no crossover, not the same person. It's not going to come from anywhere else. But what this does is that basically, since his introduction, Superman has, for the most of his life, been handcuffed to this persona of Clark Kent. So he has to balance that day-to-day life with what's going on in his superhero kind of situation. So there's always that duality, that dichotomy that you have to play off of, and sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes it becomes a burden to Superman as a character. And what Dan Jurgens did in this issue, he basically set Superman free. So that way we don't have to worry about Metropolis and Clark Kent anymore. We can just focus on the actions of Superman and how he's, helping the world become a better place. And I think that's pretty brilliant, in this driven story, which is much more action-oriented, hence Action Comics. He gets to take on those huge world-ending tasks, whereas in Superman, it's going to be a much more grounded, family-oriented tale, which Peter J. Tomasi is doing a great job with. So I think this is a very liberating aspect to the Superman character, and I can't wait to see how we can utilize that. Of course, there's this Godslayer reveal at the end, but that's not really a big deal until next issue. Another really good character exploration comes in The Flash, issue number 7. So what we see in The Flash is really August's choices. This is what this whole issue boils down to, is that Barry Allen and August could have easily been the same person. Godspeed could have been The Flash, and The Flash could have been Godspeed. That's it. Because August comes from a very similar background, he's had very similar tragic situations, and while he's trying to be a hero, he's just making that simple choice that, you know what, I don't have to preserve the life of those people that I deem unworthy. They don't serve justice, and I can distribute that in my own. And that's what makes him a villainous character compared to a heroic character like Barry Allen, who chooses to preserve life even in the face of somebody with great evil and villainy. And overall, it's very cool. It's just that we get ended on a cliffhanger where it's just like Barry is clearly not up to par when it comes to Godspeed, and how is that going to impact the history that Barry has laid out with this Rogues Gallery? What's going to be the impact? Definitely a book I recommend picking up. You should definitely catch up on it if you have the chance. Next, we get to a book that's a little bit more underwhelming, and that's Batgirl number 3. So Batgirl is still on her globetrotting escapades, and we've got her friend, I forget his name because he is that unimportant to things, and the big thing is that while she's using her eidetic memory, remembering every possible aspect of what this scenario was, she gets drawn into a trap. But the problem is it's international, it's global, she's in a different country. So this is making it very tough to have any kind of tension or character moments in this kind of scenario. Did I like the concept? Absolutely. I really thought it was going to be more of like a mentor-mentee. You know, she's on the hunt for somebody that can teach her more about herself and being a better hero, not necessarily all these villainous confrontations that are basically traipsing all over Southeast Asia. Well, I did like the idea a little bit more from the beginning. It's not necessarily something that I can recommend people going out and catching up on, simply because I don't necessarily know where it's going to go, and where it goes might not necessarily be the best place for it. One of the books that you do need to pick up in order to keep up with DC Rebirth is going to be Titans. So in Titans number 3, we see the conclusion of the fight between Titans and Flashpoint, pre-Rebirth Titans and all that kind of stuff, and Kadabra comes back and he's got all his powers and blah, 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 blah. Doesn't really matter at that point in time, because the conclusions that we can draw from this, there's a lot of different stuff that's going on, but Wally West and Linda Park, they have a very inherent connection, and Kadabra, while he thinks, you know, he feels like this is his doing. You know, he erased Wally West from the time stream. He can't remember that. And then he was completely depowered. It's one of those things where it's definitely a book that I recommend keeping up on, simply because the interactions between Wally West and the rest of the Titans are great, and then the storyline itself is pretty good, and I keep waiting for them to throw out more crumbs for DC Rebirth, so I want to keep up with that. So it's definitely a book that I got to pick up, and that you should probably pick up too if you want to know more about Rebirth. Next we hop into Wonder Woman number 7. So this book is where we're going to see Wonder Woman and Cheetah team up and take on this dark jungle god. The underlying themes, you know, it's overall, it's a very good story. You know, you see the final conclusion, pretty average battle, what it comes down to. You know, Wonder Woman's kind of collected herself, she's got her supporters, and now she has a de-cheetified Barbara Minerva to help her out. So Greg Rucka just wrote The End of the Cheetah, who was introduced in 1987 and has been considered one of the, you know, main villains for Wonder Woman. So we just saw The End of the Cheetah, for now, in Wonder Woman number 7, which was a huge surprise for me. I didn't really expect that at all. So props to you for hiding that from me and making that a very nice and revealing and telling moment inside this book, Greg Rucka. You did a good job. Another book that did a really good job is Detective Comics 941. So while we're continuing on with this Night of the Monster Men crossover series, you do get a little bit of the different flavors of the individual books. While I've continually said that the voices of the main writers, you know, like Tim Seeley, Tom King, James Tynion, these writers are kind of taking a backseat to Steve Orlando, who's piloting this whole ship through this event. You do get a little bit of the flair. There's still a major focus on the Bat family compared to Batman. I think Batman's in like 6 panels in the entire thing, which is totally fine as long as you get strong character moments for those other parts of the Bat family, which is what they do here. The big reveal, of course, is that there's this infectious nature to what's going on. So, you know, it's either instilling great fear or fury and things like that. And then ultimately, when Nightwing and Gotham Girl are tangling with their own monster person, they end up on the short end of the stick. So that's going to be really interesting to see in the next book, which is Batman number 8, I believe, which we continue on with part 4 of Night of the Monster Men. I'm going to keep reading each of the books simply because they're good books on their own, but the fact that they're telling a cohesive story throughout this entire event is definitely props to the creative team at DC. Next, we're going to hop on to Doctor Strange Annual number 1. So in the Annual number 1, it kind of takes a bit of a break from the Last Days of Magic story arc, which just concluded, but we do get a little bit of backstory, and we get the reintroduction of Clea into Doctor Strange's world. But really, it's like, hey, there's that lady love interest for Doctor Strange, so that's pretty cool. The other thing that we get in here is an introduction to the Sorcerers Supreme, which is coming out next month, and it's a secondary parallel book for Doctor Strange. It looks kind of interesting. I might give it a shot for the first issue, but it's definitely not quite the same as Jason Aaron and Chris Bocciolo, what they're doing on the main book, which is what I really enjoy. Probably one of the more anticipated titles of this week is Batman Beyond Rebirth. And I have to say that I was coming into this extremely fresh. I had very little information on what was going on in the Batman Beyond universe, and simply knew, oh yeah, Terry McGinnis, Batman, old, Bruce Wayne's old, all that kind of stuff. There was an overwhelming amount that I did not understand in this book. This is not a good entry-level book for anybody. It's, you know, 3 or 4 pages of origin story that kind of ties into those things. And they try to throw, like, a whole bunch of backstory into very weird spots. So as an introduction to Batman Beyond as a series, I've got to remember that this DC Rebirth stuff is not a new series. It is not a new 52. It is just a continuation with some modifications. I would have to do a whole heck of a lot of homework to get caught up to speed on this, so that has clearly put me out of the running for Batman Beyond. With so many good Bat books coming out, I just can't see myself throwing this onto the pull list. Sorry. But the other DC Rebirth title, Teen Titans Rebirth, man, now that was an ass kicker. So Ben Percy did a phenomenal job with the introduction of this new Teen Titans group. And by introduction, I mean the capture and hostage taking of the individuals in the team. So Damian Wayne comes in as a total brat and, is like, okay, cool, I'm just going to take out all these people and I'm going to force them to be my minions. And that is so awesome. I was so stoked when I read it. It was really fun the way they portrayed it. And Beast Boy was entertaining. Starfire, a very bleeding heart kind of individual. He takes advantage of those things. He basically manipulates all these individuals to just being completely suppressed and detained so that he can take care of them and present to him his offer, if he has an offer, or if he's just going to be like, yo, we're the Teen Titans now. Done. I'm your leader. I'm your boss. We're going to take care of this and we're going to be a superhero team. I could totally see him doing that, and it just gives me a great sense of joy for where this book is going to go in the future, which is why I'm highly recommending that people go out and pick it up if you haven't already. To finish out the week, we're going to talk about a Vertigo book, and that is Frostbite #1. Primarily Joshua Williamson from the Flash series is writing this book about a post-apocalyptic future where we're in the second ice age, and we've been in it for almost 60 years. And there's a disease called frostbite, which can potentially turn humans into, almost living ice cubes. Basically, they freeze their bodies and become ice on a cellular level. And this is going to be a story about dishonorable people doing honorable things for kind of murky reasons, and how they venture across the ice, the barren, frozen wasteland to try and, save humanity, get a paycheck. There's all kinds of different motivations, and those are going to be explored over the next 4 or 5 issues. I think it's a 5-issue series, so they're definitely going to be something where, okay, you're going to be seeing some twists and turns, and it's a book that if you're into that kind of series, I can definitely see you wanting to pick it up. It seems like it's going to be a real interesting read. So those are all the books that I picked up this week, but I want to know what you guys grabbed too. On top of that, I actually got a Marvel free previews, so if your shop has one of these, grab one of those too, because it's going to give you a little bit of insight into what's coming up, and it definitely helped make some decisions on where Marvel's going in the future. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe right down there to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.